Our journey is a very squiggly one. I think a lot of people in this world have this idea that there's a plan. I have absolutely no belief in plans. The world is changing so fast, things are evolving so quickly, and so we really need to think about our real benefit to ourselves, to our families, to our colleagues, is our ability to be adaptable. It's a time where we have to have the confidence to say, actually, legacy is no longer the trait that we want to hold on to. The way we've always done things is not going to carry us forward. And so for me, I've always had this sort of frustrating look at education saying, why do we always do things the way we've always done things, given that everything else we see in our world has changed? And so I'm going to take you on a short journey to where we are today in reverse. I'm going to start from the current as of now and work backwards to a few years ago, just to see how thought changes and how agility, we hear about the ability, you need to be agile, you need to pivot. We've got all this terminology we talk about in design thinking, and we talk about the way we should be working. But actually, at the end of the day, it all comes down to people. It comes down to the people around you. And in my particular case, the thing that makes me so passionate is the ability to create a culture. And I think you could actually believe in anything at all. You could become the most incredible nanotechnologist, a biotechnologist. You could become an incredible pharmacist. You could do anything if you decide in the beginning, what kind of culture do you want to work in? What kind of people do you want to be surrounded by? And so that was my beginning of my entire career, was actually, who do I want to work with? So my slide at the beginning is, I literally believe that the team that we have got the most incredible place, not just to work, because I don't think anybody who actually is involved with the My Lab talks about work. We talk about a mission. We talk about change. We talk about getting stuff done. And so let me just take you back about a month. So after a journey, we decided that we can reach a lot of children across the country in our labs. We can re-educate them, we can tell them about science and technology, we can tell them about all the fabulous things in the world, but not everybody can get in a bus with their school, or cross the city, or cross the town, or cross the country. So we thought, we've evolved, we've moved on, and so we launched Mind Lab Kids. And so we're going to start at the most recent evolution of what we've done. And this is all about getting kids up to the age of 12 excited about science and technology and engineering and maths by actually putting challenges to them and getting them to respond by video. You can't chat, you can't type. All you can do is show what you do. And so what we did is we launched this platform with the view that, how do we get to the kids in Eketahuna or Kaitaia? And so our educators changed from teaching classes to going onto an online portal.
Which is OHP
I've just
paper.
shortened it.
It's kind of like see-through paper. And we're going to make the tubey part. It's got to fit the base of your torch. And you're going to want 2 pieces. You're going to just take one piece and take your bubble wand, and you're just going to wrap it around.
And while we did this, these are all our staff.
Hello, this is Crazy Cat, and I'm going
And the kids responding.
tell you how many African bush elephants I think are equal to the weight of the Earth. And this is a really tricky one. It's taken me so long to figure out, but I think I figured it out now. You can't actually weigh the Earth, because to be able to weigh something, you need to have gravitational force to measure how much something weighs. So scientists use something called Earth mass, which looks like that. Scientists use Earth mass to measure other things in space.
So you start to realize how smart our kids really are if you just give them a platform. When you just suddenly think, what if we let them talk?
Hi, so today I'm doing the response for making Play-Doh. So all you need for this is a bowl, a cap, I've got a quarter cap because I'm making that much, salt,
Hi guys, Conquer Boy here. I'm going to be responding to Viking Rich's why do balloons pop? They pop because of the pressure and these high pressure air inside the balloon, and so when it pops, all of the rubber has came together at a very fast speed.
So you can just start to imagine, this is just weeks old, and already we've got kids from across the country for the first time being able to think about what they're doing. But I also want to talk about one of my most incredible employees, Damon, who's here tonight. Now, Damon is the most modest, and I'm going to potentially say shyest people in everyday conversation. He is one of our thinkers on our team from day one who has brought the most inventive mind. He started in his life in a cabinet maker, he went into visual effects, and he is a tinkerer at heart. And I stole Damon from a previous business of mine. I take great people with me, and I take great pride in taking great people with me on my journey. So one day, when we talked about doing this, Damon hadn't really said very much about this platform because I thought it's probably unlikely that this relatively quiet person would actually be involved. And then we came in, and this video was uploaded. He shot it himself.
Hello, it's me, Felicity. I am so sad, so sad. I do not know how this copper that is not normally attracted to the magnet is spinning round and round and round. I do not understand how this Homer Palamota works. But wait, I have an idea. Yes, you could help me. You could find out how this works and explain to me how this copper spins round and round and around. How does the motor work? I need to know how it works. I swear.
So you start to get an idea of the type of culture that we have, where no one really takes themselves too seriously. And it goes right across our organisation, whether they are working from a home office in Gisborne or in Kaitaia or Christchurch or Invercargill. It doesn't matter where they are, we hire people based upon this passion for life, learning and children. And so going back more than a month ago, but not much further back, we launched another product. This is called Tech Toolbox. And this is actually from a shot last night. In the evening, about 7:30 last night, a bunch of mostly retired people came along with a buddy to learn how to make websites. Next week they might do AR, the week after they might do coding, the week after that. They'll keep going for 10 weeks, once a week. And we found out there is such a disconnect between people who want to know about the future and have a way of knowing about the future. And so for us, it's an incredible opportunity again. We're saying this is not just about kids, but it's about the people they connect with, whether they be their parents, their teachers, or their grandparents. And then a year ago, we launched Tech Futures Lab. So the Mind Lab launched with Tech Futures Lab, which is a facility for executives and for board members, where they can do anything from a Master of Technological Futures or learn about things like blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cybersecurity. So we saw again, you've got businesses making massive amounts of decisions and strategies going forward without necessarily even having the language to ask the right questions about some of the biggest technologies of our time. And so we launched this about this time last year and said, how do we grow beyond just where we initially were around children? But before that, we thought about the teachers of New Zealand. And we thought, how do we educate an entire generation of teachers? There are 60,000 teachers in this country. Most of them are of the age of 50 and above. The average age is 55. So they've got technology in their hands, they've got children who are digitally competent and capable from the time they enter school, and we thought, how do we reach such a vast and broad demographic of teachers? And so with the team's input and just again really creative thinking and breaking all of the rules, we figured out a way of scaling a product, developing a qualification at postgraduate level, and rolling it across now 31 locations. So we're very proud to say that a very small team of dedicated experts and teachers have taught 1 in every 24 teachers in this country on this one program. But to get to that point, we had to know what teachers didn't understand or where their confidence was not at the level where they felt that they could do great things in their classroom. So we launched Hack Education. And we went out with these 3 questions. We posed this to just parents and teachers. We posed it to students and said, in the future, education will be ... Or in the future, education will not have. And thirdly, I wish education. And we gathered, crowdsourced a whole lot of intelligence and insight from across the country about actually what do we want our education system to be. And we kept pedaling fast, a small team saying, this is the catalyst for us to go out and teach teachers. But before we did that, we were running holiday programs. Just a few kids every holidays, normally about 30 every day across our labs, where we could get children who wanted to deep dive into things like robotics or electronics or coding and give them an experience where they got really comfortable with STEM subjects and about how they could actually participate in the future. But we didn't launch the Mind Lab there. We started even before that with school groups. And we realised that we had to reach children first and have schools have the ability to come into a physical location and ask those hard questions of, how do you do it? How do you teach this stuff? How do you resource it? How do I contribute as a teacher if I don't really understand it? So all the hard questions, we enable them to come in and do this. And so now we teach 40,000 children every year, and we have done for the last 3 years. But before that, we had to think about how would we transform education? Why would we transform education? Why would you disrupt something that everybody has an opinion of? It doesn't matter who you talk to in this world, everybody has a view on education. And how would we work out which ones were correct? And not be swayed by people who had agendas? Or how would we not be swayed by people who perhaps just didn't have enough information to make good decisions? So we went back and said, where do these kids need to be? Where do they need to go? So we asked a lot of questions. We know what the future looks like. I spend all my days researching, looking at the future, looking at the change of industry. We know that we've got new technologies that are literally in front of our eyes are transforming the world. And so these children are fully aware because they are self-educating in a way we've never seen before. This is the first time we have a generation of kids who totally know how to find information, how to fix things, do things, create things, collaborate, because it's the world they live in as digital natives. So we went back to students and said, what do you think? What do you need to know? We know you know how to find how to do things, but what don't you know? What can we help you with? We asked their teachers, what do you guys think? What are we going to need to do? You're seeing them in your classrooms. What are the questions your students are asking that you just don't know how to answer? How do we give you those skills and tools to go forward? So we went back again to the students and asked a few more questions. We asked a lot of students and said, help us understand. And here's Damon kicking off a session with students before they get into their classes. But what we believed is, number one, that learning has to be active. I was at a wonderful school today, and the students spoke so highly of the school, and I was so impressed. And I said, if the one thing you could change, what would it be? And they said, in unison, school is boring. They like school, they like the culture, they love the cultural activities, they love the sport, they love the teachers, they love their friends, they love their lunchtime, but school is boring. How do we move beyond that when we know that no one learns when they're bored? How do we make it so it's a little bit fun, a little bit experimental, and the ability to fail? And so right now we have a generation who don't know the word fail because they're taught you have to succeed, that you have to know the answer. The question has an answer, you need to know the answer. That's the question with the answer will give you the golden key through the test. So at no point do you get the ability just to go out and fail and figure it out. But to do that, education has to be seriously messy. It doesn't fit in cubby holes and little labels and Ziploc bags. It doesn't sit in coat hooks and tidy lunch boxes and no rubbish bins. It becomes active and it becomes messy, but it becomes really culturally rich and really lively. And people, and these kids that we're with all the time, get so excited about what they're doing. So before this, one of my insights were kids who are 12 years old today and younger have grown up entirely with an inquiry education model. Most of them are in modern learning environments. A typical classroom now at primary school, if you were building a school today, would have 100 children and 3 staff. They would all have digital devices. They would be self-educating, forming groups, collaborating, passing the way through their knowledge by self-review and peer review. They would be facilitated by teachers, not led, and they've had this now for 7 years. So they're arriving at our high schools this year as Year 9 students, and the schools are saying, huh? Who are these kids? How is it they're self-teaching? And they're inquiring, and they talk about the way they learn and how they experiment and how they fail. So we've already seen that. And so we're seeing the joy that some of these kids are having by doing things differently, but they're just starting to trickle into our high schools. They won't get to discover. They won't get that chance to experiment. They'll never have this again unless we change the system. And it's not that schools don't want to change, they desperately want to change. I work with schools all the time, and the teachers are passionately about wanting to reconnect with kids and make it so they can take them on this journey. And we only need to do one thing to see where we need to go, is to look at the new world of entrepreneurs. There is an entire generation of under 18-year-olds who are more entrepreneurial than the over 18-year-olds, who are creating businesses and trading and dealing and wheeling and learning and sharing and collaborating with each other. And they're all over the world. But for me, where it started, we launched in 2013. Just 3.5 years ago, all of this has happened in 3.5 years. And 3.5 years ago, I read this article by one of my most favourite authors, who happened to be in New Zealand just 2 weeks ago, Thomas Friedman, who works for the New York Times, great author of many books, and he just said, everything is on Google. The world only cares about what you can do with it. It's not about what you can retain. And in that moment in time, I looked at my children, who were young teenagers, and I thought, how are they going to learn that it's not about retention of information? So at the very beginning, my trigger was about my own children and their absolute hate of tests, because it never showed the things that they really were good at. And I thought there's got to be a different way. So I want you to imagine, the year is 2018. It's a few hundred days away, not even that probably. These students are going to depart at the end of this year and face an entirely new world. What skills will they take to it? How adaptable will they be? How flexible and collaborative and creative has the system allowed them to be? Or will they all go into the same pattern of going into university, doing a degree where 50% of students do not complete? And this is not against universities. I'm a great advocate of higher education, but it's about choice. It's about children who don't fit the system. For all the children we don't actually pass, and the ones who fail in our current system, that we need to wrap our arms around and figure out what's good for them. because bright children will always make their way. We need a system that rewards all children, no matter what their skills are. And we need to do it for one reason, if nothing else, is because in every single week since 2010, there are 2.5 million new Generation Alpha students born. The world population when I was born has since doubled, plus some more. We're heading towards, within a few years, or a couple of decades, so by 2050, 10 billion people who are more educated, middle class, skilled, healthy than we've ever had before. Our competition for our children is going to be crazy. We're going into a time when they've never seen the level of competition they're going to face by this raising middle class. By 2030, the world, 60% of the world's population will be middle class. And just a few years ago, it was under 20%. But on top of that, we're living longer. Most of us in this room would expect to live to 90 or 100. So retirement at 65 is not going to be there. We're all going to be part of this new generation. So for me, I'm hungry for change and keep changing. I'm really excited about what we can be, and we get to choose. So as New Zealanders, we get to say, what is our future? What do we want to stand for? Who do we want New Zealand to be in 10 years and 20 years, but also in 100 years? So the first thing we're going to be doing is we're hoping, with fingers crossed and bated breath, that this ministry very soon will allow us to open a public high school in Auckland called the Innovation College, so that we can have children have an alternative high school system. And then also at the end of this year, we've partnered with another organisation called Teach First, and we're going to start teaching teachers before they become teachers for the first time, not just teachers in the system. So we just continue on our journey of thinking about which part of this ecosystem can we disrupt. And the way we do that is by having this incredible team who are absolute passionate about this country. And it's a perfect time for me to bring my amazing colleague, Fee, to the stage, who's going to swap out, who took my vision and came in as a general manager, and she does the really hard work of bringing all these operations together at once. So literally, cue Fee.
Hi everybody, I'm Fee. Firstly, it's important for me to say I'm a failed interior designer. That was my first career, and I always thought that was going to be my only career. And then I had about 15 years in the digital marketing and advertising space before I came across to the Mind Lab by Unitec 2 years ago. Secondly, it's important for me to say I also do suffer from imposter syndrome. Something that's always sitting on my right shoulder going, but you don't know education. Why are you in education? How does that work out? And it's really interesting, and I think it's important to point it out because so many of us do suffer from imposter syndrome, but it's also what drives me because I don't have all the answers. The kids that we teach every day don't have all the answers. The people that I work with don't have all the answers. And it makes it an amazing place where we work. So what I want to do is to just take you through about 5 minutes, almost the other side to what Frances has been talking about with our journey, and to kind of take my imposter syndrome, if you like, of not being in education and what I've brought from the digital advertising and marketing space and the importance of, I guess, building a good culture and making an innovative place in which we work in. So Frances was talking about, you know, this rise of the millennials and how the importance of these children that are coming through and these millennials that we're working with. So one thing that I find incredibly, I guess, humbling is that we employ many millennials and they think differently, they act differently. They are very keen on understanding purpose and having purpose. They want to be listened to, they want to have input into strategy, into values, into vision. They don't necessarily want to climb the ladder like I certainly did 10, 15 years ago, thinking that I had to work 70 hours a week sitting at my desk. This is changing. This flexibility in workplace and the way in which you work is changing. And that's fantastic for the way in which we can build businesses going forward. Frances was also talking about this tests and the fact that this whole knowledge retention debate is still going on. We don't employ people that have got A+. There's no point in that. We want to employ people that have got an incredible culture to them, that have got vision and values, that they want to be on this journey with us that is not perfect. We don't have all the answers, and do you know what? We might fail, and that's okay, because we learn, we discover. And also the thing is that we're teaching this to kids every single day. We're saying it's okay to fail. We want you to build the resilience. We want you to discover different paths. We want you to be creative, innovative, because we genuinely know that these kids that we're teaching, they are our innovators, our inventors, our creators, our makers, our doers of the future. So we have to practice what we preach. And also what we're seeing, again, what Frances was talking about with regards to Google, so much is on Google. And the great thing is that these kids, that they come in with us every single day at the Mind Lab, they know that they can get knowledge anywhere. And they're completely comfortable chatting to the next person, to the person next to them. They're okay talking out loud, the way in which we were taught. Don't talk to your buddy next to you. Make sure that when you're doing your assessment or you're doing your exam, don't look over the shoulder of that next person. That's all changed. And lastly, we were looking at how we're seeing all these amazing entrepreneurs coming through. Tristan is an Auckland kid. We are teaching these kids every day. So we want these kids to fail. We want them to learn in different ways. We want them to go and chat to the people next to them, because they're not going against assessment. They're not necessarily going to university. They're going online to teach themselves, or they're even going online to create these new courses, as Tristan has done. So for us, it's about looking at these kids and empowering their teachers to be different, to take risks. And for us, it's about building this amazing culture that these kids, that the people that we're employing can go out into industry, no matter where they are, and be okay with their failure and be okay to be amazing people. So for me, this is about having a visionary such as Frances, having a board that lets us be flexible, that lets us take risks. You know, we know that this time next year we'll be sitting here and we'll be a completely different business. We'll have lots of different programs, and that's actually okay, because we don't have a 10, 15-year strategy. Everything changes because we're now living in such a different world. So for me, and you may see in the exhibition, this is about working with amazing visionaries like Frances, an amazing creator, doer, inventor in Damon. We have all these diverse personalities within the Mind Lab by Unitec, but that's what makes us great, and that's what's made us move so quickly and to be where we are today, teaching 100,000 kids and teaching over 3,000 teachers, and now, as Frances was saying, we've launched our Tech Toolbox program, which is parents. We have this ability now to tap into all of these different areas. So as I was saying, for me, it's about this massive culture that we've been able to build around us to be able to reach our vision. That's all from me. Thank you.
But if I may start, and I want to come to Damon and your contribution to this shortly, but I want to start, if I may, just backing up a little bit to the big picture. Frances, when you and I first spoke, you started talking to me instantly about big global trends, huge things that were happening in the world. You talked about synthetic proteins. You talked about disruption to the things we take for granted about New Zealand life. And I confess I was kind of scratching my head a little bit, because I was coming to talk to you about education and about helping kids to do robotics and things. And here you were talking to me about huge global trends. And it took me quite a while to understand the connection that you as a global thinker were actually working on things then how you could have a very, very local effect in somehow to respond to that. So can I just get you to talk a little bit about how you arrived at the point where you realized if you could, to educate lots of kids, you had to educate teachers, and to educate teachers, you needed to educate, and so I left with this mental picture of a tree, which you were shaking the tree in order to make the leaves at the end wiggle.
I think if you look at it, let's just picture a 5-year-old today. So they're going to leave school, let's say at 18, and before they just make decisions. So they have 13 years. So we are now planning 13 years in advance what they need to have. And that's a big responsibility. You know, so that, for me, that was the premise. It's like we are teaching people for the future, not the skills we need today, not what we did, what served us well, not the careers that we've had, but for an entirely different world. And so when you frame it that way and saying, actually, we have to be crystal ball gazers. We have to have all the insights about every global trend. And so for me, the more I researched about major global trends and the types of futures that our children will go into, the more I said, well, who is going to change it? So who do I expect will change the system for my children? And I realised that actually no one was having that bold conversation. And at that point I thought, having been an educator before, well, maybe I have to do it. You know, maybe it starts with a small idea. And for people who know me, they'll know when I first built the Mind Lab for children, I thought this will be just a one little lab in Auckland. It'll be a lovely little organisation. It'll be my gift to Auckland and I'll have fun. And little did I know what a can of worms it would open in terms of people suddenly resonating and saying, you know, let me understand why you're doing this. And it didn't matter if they were government or policymakers or grandparents or parents. They were all sort of like, I'm trying to understand why would you do this? Where is the need? And very quickly the need was identified. Yeah.
And there was another thing you said that really surprised me, and I think it's the first time I'd heard any of our innovators speak this way, is you described putting yourselves out of business. You described this notion, and I'll get the figures wrong, please forgive me. You said that if we do our job really, really well, in a couple of years' time, we won't need to do this at all, and we'll have moved on to something completely different. And that, as an innovation process, I thought was really interesting and really inspiring for future generations, that you can continuously enter a cycle of innovation yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, we're a social innovation, so we're looking at the social call and we're saying, actually, if we're not needed anymore, and actually, in our case, if it was schools were teaching it or it had become so commonplace, then let's not be there. Let's get out and do something different. And I think that we've always set out that way, saying, you know, this is not a gig for life. This is, you know, we will keep evolving. I have to say, I think my staff are very tolerant of me because I literally am an ideas a day person. And
Yep.
if I ever go away on a plane, that's when they get really scared because it's like 10 hours or 24 hours on a plane. They're like, oh no, what's she going to do? But there is that, you know, you have to be of the view in today's world that nothing's permanent. You do the very best you can for the time it's relevant, and then know when your time is up and know when to move on. And I think when I work with executives in particular and people in sort of middle of their career, the number of people who do not change from jobs they really dislike because of fear of change. And I think we've got to get beyond that because, you know, life's short and we've got to break through and just say the idea that you've got inkling in the back of your mind forever and you've never quite managed to mobilize it, do it. Because actually, life's for living.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, Damon, can I invite you? I have a mental picture of you being at the sharp and pointy end of all of this because day in, day out, you're with kids. And you're also, if I've understood it correctly, you're creating a lot of the teaching resources that in the other Mind Lab sites use around the country and other teachers can use. And effectively, you're creating tools that kind of turn that lever of the leverage that more and more people can have more and more influence from this. In the context of your position, how do you respond when Frances is speaking about these big global trends and your role in all of that?
To be perfectly honest, we all go through and create a lot of the content that's there. We work as a team, and when Frances does come in and actually talks about new ideas, we're excited, a bit scared, but also really excited because we truly do believe in all of this. I mean, if you were to ask any staff member there, they believe it in the sense of disrupting and changing education. And for us, it is a team thing. It's not just one person coming up with an idea. It's everyone coming up with an idea. And we have this saying where, you know, even if I come up with an idea, it is actually our idea because it's been triggered from so many different responses. Yeah. You know, and it's one of the coolest jobs I've ever had in my life. I get to tinker for a living. I get to design and invent and do some amazing things.
Mm.
And can I ask, how do you balance that with, you know, you've got school groups coming in on a daily basis. They're booked up, they're coming, they need their lessons, they need it needs to be organized. And how do you maintain that culture of tinker, try, experiment, something new, when actually you've almost got a conveyor of bookings and obligations you have to do, which is the closest match to what most businesses will have, of needing to do their day job at the same time of trying to reinvent themselves and think of new things?
So we all live at the Mind Lab.
But Damon does literally, I think.
The thing with it is a lot of us swap each other out, and we all get a chance to go through and develop and design. We have the school groups, so you're right, we have school groups coming through, and we have to go through and cater for that and build these amazing lessons for them. And then after that, you'll find that a lot of staff members like to actually tinker after hours at home because it's just who we are. And we take a lot of that stuff and we bring it back into the actual school groups. So, 24/7 we're tinkering. Like after I go away from here tonight, I've got a plan of some ideas that I'm going to be playing around with. So, yeah.
I should actually say before, when we talked about fear, and Damon said, it can be a bit scary. Our ideas of scary are very different. So, I will walk in after hours when no one is left, and Damon's there at work, and he'll be flying a drone inside at full speed. That's my idea of fear. Okay, so you're very different.
Yep.
So, Fee, I know you spent quite a bit of your career overseas as well.
Yes.
Part of what we're trying to do here is make connections as to why New Zealand's an interesting place to do this. And it's not just the fact that we all live here. Can I ask for your reflections as someone who's been outside and come back to New Zealand and looking at New Zealand education in the context of what you've seen elsewhere?
What I found really interesting, I remember when I came back, or even actually when I went overseas for the first time, was that because we're in such a small country, we actually learn lots of different skills. And when you go overseas, and I went to England, had 8 years in England, suddenly everybody that I was working with was very specialised. But actually from a New Zealand perspective, because I'd done lots of different things, they're like, oh, you do that and you do that. And I was like, yep. And so actually, I think for us, that's a fantastic thing to have. And so it means that in your nature, you're okay with testing and playing around with different things. As a New Zealander, I actually think that that's one of the benefits of being here. Small country, do lots, try all sorts of different things.
You can reinvent yourself without having to.
Totally, yeah.
I think it's a nice chance to put it to the floor. Has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask? Well, while you guys
there we go. There's one.
Here we are. David Reed.
Hi, Frances, you mentioned...
Got a microphone there if you want.
Microphone, all right. Hi, I'm David Reeves from Auckland Museum. Frances, you mentioned that we've got a generation of really inquisitive, curious, inventive, iterative learners in the primary school age, and then they hit high school and it's like, what now? What are the particular characteristics or perhaps impediments in the secondary school education system that are resistant to this way of thinking?
Partially it is because of assessments. So if you talk to most teachers, they do get very frustrated by they have to teach to assessments, so that they've got to get them through the year. So it's almost like we have to teach this to get this, so you know this, so that when the exam comes that you know this information, because that's what they're measured by. Pass rates, completion rates, achievement rates, they're all of the key measures. And I think also there has been very little opportunity to change the education model while you're in it. It's only really when you talk to teachers who've had sabbaticals and they've been out and they've gone, oh, that's how you could do it differently. Because when you're in that grind all the time, they work so hard that actually they're just so conscious of next day. And they don't have the luxury of a team like we have, where we've got people sort of prodding them on the side and give them some relief time to go and do things. It is much more that industrial model. What I know is the passion within the schools is just so huge to make change. And I have to give credit to the government. They are trying also to make the change. Everybody's aware of what needs to change. It's just, it is a Titanic. There is not an easy fix for this. As a parent of teenagers, the hard thing is they are literally a transitional group. The kids who are going through our high school system right now are learning the same way that we learned. They are 1 hour periods, textbooks, pretty similar, the same, very much retention of knowledge, and yet the kids coming right behind them are not like that at all. So we're hoping that the change will happen very quickly. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more from the floor?
So we're sort of seeing the technology side of things come into school sports, and that's particularly with the rise of... So we're seeing the rise of technology coming into school sports, and that's particularly through eSports. I was wondering if you thought sort of about how that might fit in with your objectives. as an organisation and what that means for children and learning and, you know, STEM.
Well, I mean, like everything, we need balance. So eSports, sports of any form, I think that, you know, if you're thinking just purely digital sports, yeah, I mean, we don't have any, so we don't advocate for people spending time on computers all day. Certainly that's not our view. We see it entirely as tools to make them extend their ability to connect or to collaborate. I think the very worst thing you can do is put children in front of YouTube and just have them meaninglessly going, what am I doing here? Or, you know, endless hours of gaming. That is certainly not going to be the development that children need. It's a very easy thing to do as a parent, to go just spend an hour or so and then another hour goes past. But actually, it is tricky because the very same device or tool that enables children to have the most rich learning experience and ability to connect with other like-minded children is the same thing that has a whole lot of negative things. It has, you know, access to bullying, it has access to gambling, it has access to porn. I mean, it's hard, and I think that we still haven't figured out how we work out those two worlds, where one is this rich world of, you know, finding things out, figuring out, learning, connecting, and the same switch, the same mouse, the same world can be quite the opposite. And so we need to teach rules that are very different in the school, the rules that we learned growing up, which was how to cross the road safely. It's about, you know, you can't unsee things. Once you've delved into things, your privacy never comes back. You know, those photographs never disappear. You know, so we've got to teach those things as well. And I think eSports is an example where, yes, it is a career for some people, but it wouldn't be something that we'd be out there sort of personally advocating in terms of learning.
Can I ask a bit about disruption? Because I'm going to draw a parallel with one of our other innovators here, is Peter Beck and Mind Lab. Rocket Lab.
You can come and join me any day.
Yeah, different lab. And they consciously have, by placing themselves in New Zealand, as well as it having a physical advantage for what they particularly do, they felt that they didn't have the baggage of 1960s space technology that said you have to do it a particular way. In the United States and Europe, they had this heavy industry from the 1960s that said that's how you get into space. And every space program in those countries effectively picks up from that point. By being in New Zealand, they gave themselves a clean slate. How have you given yourselves a clean slate in education, which, let's face it, isn't clean? It's all encompassing. It's all around us. There are schools. There are ministries. There's a huge infrastructure. How on earth have you been able to create a clean slate in which you've been able to do things differently?
I think the majority of our staff who, certainly in the beginning, none of them are formal teachers. And I think when you come out, so we're all educators. We've all been involved with education for many years, but we haven't gone through that traditional teachers' college process. Many of them come from industry or tertiary organisations. So only over time do we bring more and more teachers in, but by then we already had that culture that we wanted. So it's like moth to a light. Our philosophy and our culture would then attract the types of teachers that we wanted. Yep. But in the beginning, we were looking at it completely from a practical, how would you do it again if you did it differently? And it's the same question I ask businesses when they're saying, they're losing margins, their shareholders are asking for better returns, all the same sort of things. And I say, if you started your business again tomorrow, clean slate, would you do it differently? And they always say, oh my God, I'd totally do it differently. And so we'll do it differently. Yeah. And I think that do it differently, go with that common sense approach. Sometimes people just think innovation or disruption is really tricky, but actually it's not if you just go take a practical look and say which parts of what you do no longer are fit for purpose. Yeah. And then go after that bit.
And can I also invite you to compare doing this for adults and children? We're talking specifically about the Mind Lab, but of course the Tech Futures Lab does a lot of this with adults in corporate environments and in industry. But that feels like a different tool, but to shake the same tree. How do you find the difference in responses and outcomes working with adults versus working with the generation who are growing up as digital natives?
Well, interesting enough, and certainly others can comment on this too, the way we teach teachers and children is exactly the same, because we're keeping them within that context of everyday teaching and education. When you move into working with boards and executives, it's an entirely different, because pride gets much more in the way.
Yeah.
You know, teachers go in with the view of, I want to learn, I want to be great, I want to engage my children, and boards and execs go in going, I just don't want to look stupid. And so you have to give them a really safe place to say, no one knows all the answers here. You'll know some things so deeply and other things will be completely foreign to you. Let's just kind of put it out there. And, you know, I think, you know, again, it comes back to we're often, in our careers, the further we get into our careers, the more we are expected to know everything. And that's just not reasonable. It's, you know, nobody knows everything. I certainly am learning things every day, and I keep thinking, gosh, if I ever get to the point I felt I knew everything, then, you know, someone shoot me, because that's a terrible place to be. Yeah. Have you any other comments on?
I was just thinking about some experiences that we've had with Tech Toolbox. So one thing that was really fascinating in our first group of parents, we started them in February for 10 weeks. And within that group, we had parents and we had grandparents, and they were bringing friends and children and grandchildren along. And one woman who was on the program, she loved the augmented reality week, just absolutely buzzing. And then at the end of the 10 weeks, we actually interviewed her and we said, tell us about your experience. She's absolutely buzzing. And she said, one of the most amazing things that came out of this was, we've just had Easter, and I was able to create an Easter egg hunt for my granddaughter using augmented reality. So she went around the garden, in the house, out of the house, and every time she would find something, she'd put her phone and suddenly a new clue would come up, and which led her through to the Easter eggs. You know, and I hope she won't mind me saying, but you know, she was a grandmother, right? So she was 60s, I suspect, granddaughter there, and that's what I love, is because we're just closing this gap, but in taking away the fear and bringing those two groups closer and closer together. Because, as Frances was saying earlier, there are some negative connotations that come out of technology, but there are also some amazing things. So if we can get over that little barrier and help them, that's when the magic comes out, and that sort of makes our job, you know, a pretty amazing place to be.
And Damon is the first person to say it's not about technology, it's about whatever you find. And so, you know, he is as much low tech as high tech. I mean, he is the gadget man, I have to say. Like every new toy that's on the market, Damon has it before anyone's ever heard of it. But beyond that, he's also low tech. He creates things out of, you know, cardboard boxes and, you know, tubes of things, and just, you know, so it's not always about the process of using technology. It could be totally low tech and about almost at a craft level of understanding scientific principles.
Speaking of which, Damon's created two very special pieces in the exhibit, which we will all be able to go and see shortly. Damon, can you tell everyone a little bit about those two and why you create them the way you do and as a tool?
Okay, so one of the pieces is a drum kit, and we have this little device which is called a makey, and it's probably one of the devices that we use quite a lot in the Mind Lab. It's something that you can pretty much invent anything and make anything out of. And we decided that we wanted to play around with coding and the makey and make a musical instrument. And when we first went through and made this, it was basically, we were talking about, well, how could a child go through and actually make a musical instrument at a very, very low cost? And we talked about making pianos, and a lot of people make pianos. So we decided we wanted to actually go through and make a proper full-on drum kit. It's really cool. We used to have one in the Mind Lab to the point where every day a child would come in and play the drums, and you get a bit, you know, kind of gets a bit annoyed listening to the drums being played 24/7. But from that, it sparked even more ideas. We've had kids come through, and the idea is seeing these kids actually understand that they can go home and make something out of nothing, and actually go on and bring back what we had a long time ago here in New Zealand, where you could repurpose things. I think we live in a throwaway society now, and the generation that's coming through right now, if your phone breaks, they will throw it away. Well, why do they need to throw it away? Discover how it works and repurpose it, turn it into something else. And that's the starting ground, where we show them how they can go through and just make something out of nothing, and something that they can get some joy out of, and then go from there even further.
Yeah, Damon's the person, if you said you've got a broken washing machine, next thing you know, he's got the copper pulled out of it and it's sitting in pieces on the floor.
Yeah.
And any more questions from the floor? The microphone, thank you.
I've had the privilege to be going through the Mind Lab. I'm one in the 24 teachers we trained. I feel like I can change the world. But with an average age of 55 in sense of teachers in New Zealand, how can you inspire and engage them in change, in realistic change that will actually support the skills that the students need to acquire really immediately? So, any suggestions?
It's a question I get asked a lot because right now, particularly in Auckland, so we have a shortage right now of all science teachers. We have a shortage of mathematics teachers, Te Reo teachers, digital technology teachers, English teachers, accounting teachers, and business studies teachers. So all are in shortage. And yesterday I heard that actually officially all Auckland teachers, full stop, are now a priority because of the cost of living here. So people are moving away in such numbers that just getting a teacher in Auckland is becoming tricky. And so younger teachers who were once going to have it as a career, just saying, well, actually, for the cost of living and salary caps out at whatever it might be, around 70,000 after working, then actually I can't live here anymore. So we have a bigger challenge. And so for me, that's another one like, oh gosh, that's a challenge I have to think about now. How do I get it so it can be more affordable? And I think right now we just need to work out how we can pay teachers better. Because it's one of those things that the very areas we're in are jobs that are available. So if you're a digital technology teacher or an accounting teacher or a science teacher, they have got great alternative options in industry. And so we've got to make it so that people can see it as a really valued career and not just I'll just become a teacher because I don't know what else to do. And teachers don't go into it for that reason. They go into it because they're passionate, and we need to figure out a way to reward them a lot better. I really believe it. Yeah.
I think that feels like the gauntlet laid down to everyone here tonight to find innovation and disrupt how we can A, afford and B, provide housing for Auckland teachers. Any more questions from the floor? I would just like then to wrap up, and before we go into the exhibition, say it's been a great privilege to get to know this team.